Love that question. What are you?
What are you?
What are you?
Every day, we perform a tiny act of faith. We look at a stranger and decide we know something about them. Not everything, just enough. Enough to decide whether they're safe, whether they belong, whether they'd probably vote like us, whether we'd sit next to them on a plane. We do it in milliseconds. It's such an effortless and ordinary act that we often don't even notice that we're doing it. Until we're wrong. And then suddenly we're forced to confront our own assumptions. And if we're lucky, our accountability for them. And that's tough, because if I could be wrong about you, what else have I mistaken for truth? When I open my inbox, this is what so many of you write to me about. Assumptions. The assumptions you have of yourself and that others have of you. And because we're a show that loves a deep dive into the deliciously messy world of identity, it almost always has something to do with race. Shocker, I know. You write to tell me that you're biracial, but you don't know if you're Black enough or white enough, or you're curious about how I perceive my own biracial identity. You write to tell me that your grandmother hid the fact that your great-great-great-grandfather fell in love with a Black woman until you started questioning all the curly hair and tan skin in the family. Some of you even ask me for permission. You ask me if you're allowed to claim something that no one else can see. It's funny. People rarely write to ask me who they are. They ask me what they are. As if somewhere beneath all the stories we've told ourselves, there must be one final answer waiting in our blood. And good Lord, don't get me started on blood. America has been obsessed with bloodline since its genocidal inception, going all the way back to when English colonizers brought with them ideas about fractioned ancestry determining legal rights for Black and Indigenous people. Let's see, we've moved through a rule that stated that even one drop of Black blood made you Black. Then there was a supposed compromise in our 1787 Constitution that counted enslaved peoples as 3/5 of a person. And, oh yeah, there's the blood fractions the government came up with that are still tied up with who is considered a citizen of many indigenous nations today. The government. Yeah. Different laws, different centuries, same impulse. Humans. We are wild, to put it kindly. The problem is, well, besides all of it, the problem is our sniff test is off. The police don't ask for your DNA when they pull you over. They look at you and respond to what they think they see. And the part we don't talk about enough is this. Sometimes that works to your advantage. There's a word for that. It's called passing. Traditionally, it describes someone who is perceived as belonging to a racial, ethnic, or cultural group that isn't the one the world expects them to belong to, often because doing so offers safety, or opportunity, or just general acceptance. Those legal rights we were talking about. Sometimes freedom, even. One of the most remarkable examples of passing is Ellen Craft in 1848. Ellen escaped slavery by passing as a wealthy white man, while her husband, William, posed as her enslaved servant. And she was so light-skinned that they got away with it. Doors open, tickets were issued. She moved through the world with a freedom she'd been denied only days before. And passing only exists because America first insisted that race was fixed, aka our blood. Our blood defined us. The irony is that people kept proving it didn't. And here's what fascinates me. Two people can walk into the exact same room carrying the exact same ancestry and be treated completely differently because of what everyone else thinks they see. That is some powerful shit. And that's what today's episode is about, the power of passing. We'll speak with 3 people who, for different reasons, are often read one way and know themselves another. And I'm less interested in how they're able to pass, and more interested in the, okay, so you do. Now what of it all? What happens when the world decides who you are? And what are you doing with that decision? From the studio set up in my bedroom, PRX, Substack, YouTube, and all the places podcasts live, this is Homegoings with Myra Flynn, a show that takes a hard look at some of the painful tensions in our society and works to find the beauty in all of it. In today's episode, I'm talking with 3 people whose lives have been shaped by their ability to pass. One learned to move between worlds.
It's nice to be able to, to have that disguise so you could fit into both cultures and nobody look at you sideways.
One refuses to let the world erase who she is.
I don't feel white in my heart.
And one spent years becoming the person he thought everyone else wanted.
And you thought that they would want a version of you that was more BET black?
Right, because I didn't think they wanted the guy from Duxbury.
This is Homegoings with Myra Flynn. This episode is available in both audio and, for the first time, video, coming soon up on our YouTube channel. Watch, listen, and subscribe wherever you found us. I met Bruce Paez at a bar in Southern California. My mom tells me I've got one of those faces that seems to invite strangers to tell me exactly what they think about politics. It's a gift, whether I ask for it or not. So Bruce felt comfortable with me to do just that. Normally, I would have smiled politely, finished my drink, and left. But for some reason, I took the bait. Bruce has kind eyes. What started as an unexpected conversation turned into a kind of odd friendship over the months, where I poke fun at him while also informing him. He does the same with me, a little veggies in the cake, if you will. And I think we continue to surprise each other. I know he continues to surprise me because Bruce has access to rooms and conversations and even politics that many people will never have. He walks into these rooms with an ease that comes from rarely having to explain himself. Or at least that's how it appears.
Drink your water now, Bruce. You're going to want to stay hydrated for this one. So, I met you at our local watering hole, DJing or just being there. And how did we even start talking? Matt Frankie.
Yes, for sure.
Shout out to Matt Frankie.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. That's kind of...
Yeah, he introduced us.
We started engaging in conversation because he sat between us.
Oh, poor dude.
I mean, it's if there was more of this in society, we'd have far fewer problems of people not just being able to talk. You and I are so different politically.
But you still don't know my politics.
Fair enough, but I do know enough.
Yeah?
Or
maybe you assume.
Maybe I assume correctly, by the way.
Here we go. Okay. This is going to be a long day, and we're not even drinking yet. Yeah.
I think if people were more capable of doing that, and there have been times when you have said, okay, enough is enough. I'm not going down that road. And I think I have once or twice as well. And we respect each other's boundaries. You leave it at that and move on.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if we can press up on those boundaries today.
Okay, so I don't necessarily enjoy talking about it with people that agree with me. That's not fun.
Right. You want somebody to push back.
Or just listen to another point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But do you listen to theirs?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
And you go home and think about it?
Yes.
That's cool.
Yep, more than you might think.
What do you think people assume about you when they see you or meet you?
They think of me as just a hard ass. Yeah, I think I'm a much softer, kinder human being than most people ever, unless you get to know me.
There we go with the jokes.
No, I'm being dead ass serious. Unless you get to know me.
You threw me a curveball when we first met.
Oh yeah. Well, that's part of what has made me a hard ass, because I've had to endure. I had the conversation with you. They see you coming. They don't see me coming at all. No, I'm Mexican. I'm white as can be to most people. Being Mexican is very family oriented. It really is. And that's me as well. Love the family, love my kids, love my grandchildren. It's also a very protective culture, and I'm proud to be Mexican.
Is everybody in your Mexican family as white passing as you are, or did you kind of?
My dad, you would never know. He's
Okay.
as light-skinned as I am. His dad was fairly light-skinned. Grandma was very light-skinned. There's more Spanish in us than Indian, and that's where that breakdown. But my dad has, all of his sisters were very light, but he had 3 very dark brothers.
When do you feel most Mexican?
Probably when I'm around my dad, for sure. You know, I don't. Yeah, probably when I'm around him, because he still does talk about it, and although he will not speak Spanish. So I had a Spanish-speaking girlfriend, and Olivia met my dad a couple of times, and she asked if she could speak to him in Spanish. I said, "You can, but he will not answer you," and he wouldn't speak Spanish to her. He just wouldn't do it.
Why?
I don't know. We were not allowed to take Spanish as a second language. My dad would not let my grandfather speak Spanish in his home, even to us kids. So no, he's also the only one in his family who went to college and got a degree. And he swears that if he was dark like his brothers, he would never been accepted into Berkeley.
So colorism is alive and well in your family.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
When do you feel most white?
When people assume that I am. It's, you know, it's nice to be able to, to have that disguise so you could fit into both cultures and nobody look at you sideways. I probably have more people look at me sideways when I'm with a group of Latins, and somebody will pop off and say something, and somebody give them an elbow. He's one of us, buddy. And you just get this look like, oh, shit. I love that. Absolutely love it.
You love to surprise people.
I just love people to get checked. You know, I mean, they're self-check. I mean, that's a self-check for them, but it's just kind of nice to be able to understand that somebody does have that I am misunderstood only because the color of my skin. I couldn't possibly be Mexican. And I think I told you, this goes back 30 years, interviewing in Beverly Hills. I'm a general contractor, build homes, and with the architect Gus, and we're sitting down in this lady's house, and she's going on, and we're trying to close the deal, and at some point she says something about, well, those Mexicans this or those Mexicans that, and I just kind of was quiet. Gus kind of kicked me under the table, like, just chill, just he probably saw me. And a second later, she said something again, and I said, "Did you happen to read my last name on the business card that you got, that I gave you?" And she said no. And Gus goes, "Well, it's Paez." And she goes, "Well, I'm not talking about his kind of Mexicans."
Woo, them fighting words.
I got up and walked out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. Got up and walked out. Didn't care about the project, and just got up and left. I haven't had too many situations in life like that were that blatant. But when somebody tells you that, I felt like said, "Oh, you mean like my dad's Mexicans, like those kind of Mexicans over there?" And she was talking about her house help, how she was just disgusted. Yeah, so we would have family gatherings, and it was it's all Latin family. It's all a huge Mexican family, and then you get up and go to school, and you're surrounded by nothing but white people, and it's like, it was kind of nice to I mean, I always thought it was just nice to have family, but back in those days, that's probably when I realized that I could revolve in two separate spaces, and it was because of the color of my skin.
Passing is a tool. Have there been ways you've used passing as a tool?
In construction, absolutely. So it's even still prevalent now that a lot of the labor force are Latin or Mexican. And I don't know how many times I would hear people just talking down to the laborers. And so the laborers that worked for me loved me because they were no different. They had lunch with us. I didn't separate people. We all had lunch together. We all ate together. A lot of times they just wanted to go sit off to the side because they just didn't feel comfortable. But if you're part of this crew, then you're going to be part of this crew. I don't know if that answered your question.
Well,
but
do you have an example from maybe those times together where you were able to use passing as a tool to an advantage, to be able to get something that you wanted or needed, or to be heard when other people couldn't be heard? Sometimes passing, people will use their voice as a voice for the voiceless. There's all sorts of ways you can use it as a tool for good or bad, you know?
Well, I think that would have been prevalent right there in the construction world, where I took care of the Latin guys that worked, and a lot of them had no idea that I was Mexican. No idea. And I just didn't play it that way. I just let it go. But I would have preferred and did gaining respect, not because of I was one of them, but because they perceived me as being white and still looked after them. So.
Gosh, there's just so much nuance in all of this. Do you feel safer because people don't immediately read you as Mexican?
In some circumstances, for sure.
Like what?
Absolutely. In very crowded bars and restaurants. Oh, yeah.
Which you like?
Oh, yeah.
You like a nice crowded bar or restaurant?
Why not? You hear people talking about groups of any different color that's in there. There's always some a-hole that will start popping off about something, and I am just as vocal if it's a Chinese person, a black person, a brown person.
You don't like racism, sounds like.
No, not at all.
So you don't consider yourself racist at all?
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all.
But you're saying you feel safer in those situations because you're not lumped in with
Correct.
the danger?
Yep. Or the perception of danger, for sure.
What do you think that safety costs you?
I don't know that it has. I mean, it hasn't cost me monetarily. It hasn't cost me friendships. It hasn't cost me to disassociate with groups of. I mean, I don't know that it has. Yeah.
So let's just put it out there. How do you vote?
What?
You conservative?
Of course.
Yeah. So did you support the Trump administration?
Yes.
And then in 2016, same thing?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm a Republican.
You're a Republican.
I'm a Republican.
Got it. How do you square some of the policies that are going on right now with immigration, with Mexicans that are incredibly conditional, right?
If you come here illegally, you are a criminal. So my dad, as a young man, he would have been probably 10-ish around that. He tells a story of one of the largest parties his parents ever threw, and that was the day that they were granted citizenship. My dad is very liberal.
Which is a fun fact.
Oh, it's way fun.
You guys must have a great time.
But he was extremely and is frustrated with the way 12 million people came into this country and are expecting to get the benefits of this country and not have had to gone through what every other immigrant has gone through or over the past 100 years.
Right.
It's frustrating to him.
It's not the first time that I've heard that from people who believe that they came in a way that was righteous and, you know, correct, and other people haven't. I'm talking about like people who are now being snatched out of their cars by ICE just by like the way that they look. It's a disorienting, fucked up time right now. And it's not really an argument that this is happening. How do you square some of the conditional and unfair treatment that's going on toward your people with your Mexican pride?
The majority of people that came across the border 4 years ago were not Mexican. They were Central and South Americans. Okay. There was plenty of Mexicans that did. The Mexicans could have come across anytime they wanted because of the borders that we have. They could come across, say they're going to get a temporary visa just for vacation for 2 weeks and come in. They could come and go as they wanted. But that doesn't. Listen, I understand. I understand the pain that they went through to come here. I would not have wanted that for anybody.
So I'm going to just invite you to stick with the question, which is, how do you feel about people who now, in 2026, people who look like me, for instance, and that you don't look like, right? You're not suffering this consequence of feeling fear while driving. Because
I'm not worried about it because so my daughter-in-law is 100% Hispanic. And I don't know of anybody haven't had the option to have to worry about that from a family aspect or from a friend's aspect. I haven't seen it. I haven't heard of it.
That was going to be one of my questions, is have you had to deal with this with anybody you've been close to?
No.
Do you think you would think differently about it if you did? If you your
Not sure. Well, it's my grandchild. Somebody's going to get hurt.
But everybody's somebody's grandchild.
Yeah, but I'm talking about a 7-year-old girl.
Well, they're taking 5-year-olds, so.
But like I said, I think the numbers of those are minimal compared to what is being. You know, we're trying to have removed from this country. I mean, they're here illegal. It is a crime to be here illegal, to come across the border the way they did. I'm not one of those that's going to go round up and become an ICE agent and go do this, but ICE has a job to do. They are here illegally, and this is probably where you're going to find somebody on the line who's going to just eviscerate me, but that's okay. I don't have. I've got empathy for their situation, but I don't have concern for their worry about being picked up.
I guess, at what point do you stop expanding your empathy? How many people is too many people?
Well, you can't answer that. I mean, you just can't. I've never really thought too much about what my life would be like if I was dark-skinned. If I was So I'm having a hard time answering that question. I really am.
I think that's that empathy part, right?
Yeah.
Is imagining yourself in the shoes of others.
Mm-hmm.
It is hard to do, but some might say, like, do the hard thing. You are somebody that I perceive to be really warm and have a big heart for the people in your community.
It not to be redundant, it's just how it happened, why it happened, why it was allowed to happen. worried me for 4 years. It wasn't just all of a sudden we're here.
In your business, in your home, in the way that you go out to eat, in your friendships, in your community, what consequences were you suffering from those 4 years personally?
None. Absolutely none.
So why would it worry you for 4 years?
If you let life affect you before you take action, you're already behind. You're 10 steps behind. You just can't wait that long. Personally, you just can't wait that long. I mean, I moved out of my house when I was 14 years old. Never went back. Never stayed another night in the house. I was given an ultimatum. Dad's also a genius. And along with that comes some awkward social aspects to his life. And I was given an ultimatum at 13 or 14. And
to move out of your house at...
I was a little bit of an athlete, so I had friends. I was already running with the high school runners, and so I had a friend, Gary, who had a house in Covina, and I hit him up and moved in and was. But I just remember that. So I was given an ultimatum. I told him no, I wasn't going to do it. He said, "Then go pack your bags." So I went down the hall. I could hear my mom going, "Jess, you better put an end to this right now." And he goes, "He'll be back before dinner." I heard him say that, and I thought, buddy, I'll never have another meal in this house. But it was the best thing that could have happened for me, for sure, without a doubt.
That is a really sad story, Bruce.
Oh, it is. It's life. But it wasn't that hard, because every Tuesday, Mom would come over to the house, bring me food and do my laundry, and she said, "If you ever let your dad know about this, ever."
He's going to know now.
Yeah.
Yes, matriarchs.
Oh, yeah.
When did you guys reconnect? Or tell me the story of how the reconnection happened. Because
You really want to know?
Clearly he's in your life now.
Oh, yeah. It was, I mean, I was always there for, probably once I got a little older, but, the holidays, their birthdays. But we were at my niece's wedding, and they had the reception at my parents' house.
How old were you at this time?
Probably mid-30s.
Wow, so
yeah,
like 15 years later, 20 years later. Yeah.
And so, a little backstory. So my dad was up at Berkeley and had my oldest sister, and he was still able to work and go to school. And then 4 years later, here I come, and he had to give up his dream of getting his master's at Berkeley, or graduate from Berkeley. And so he just went straight into work. And at a very young age, I knew that there was something between the two of us. I just did. At a very young age, knew it. Just at an absolute, at 14 I moved out, so at a very young age. So.
What do you mean something between the two of you? Like something
there was
not
just
good?
There was just no connection.
I see.
At all. Yeah.
And you said your dad is a liberal.
Mm-hmm.
He's a liberal Mexican man who doesn't want to raise his son as Mexican, and you are a conservative Mexican man who doesn't want people to only identify him as white. You two are chef's kiss for this show.
A mess.
No, it's wonderful. But I am curious, like with some of the shit we were talking about, what's going on in the world, how's that showing up for you two in your relationship?
We don't talk politics. We just don't.
What happens when you do?
As he's gotten older, he just growls at me. He just doesn't want to deal with it. He just won't. He just won't do it. That's right. We're done.
If your dad has anything to do with this disagreement, this long-held disconnect between the two of you, even though he wouldn't talk about being Mexican, he's still your Mexican heritage. I don't know, this is going to sound so trite, so feel free to say it better than I'm about to, but is any part of you just, trying to piss him off?
Of course.
No.
I met Ellie Stone the way a lot of parents meet their friends. Our kids found each other first. You know how it goes. Sometimes your kids become instant best friends, and suddenly you're spending every Sunday morning with a stranger, hoping and praying that you'll get along. Thankfully, we did and do. We're quite close now. Before I knew Ellie very well, I had assumptions. I thought, but I couldn't be sure. And then one day we had this books and blankets event at school where we basically show up and picnic with our kids. And Ellie brought her parents with her. The second I saw her parents, I thought, aha, they confirmed for me that I'd been seeing something the rest of the world usually misses. And Ellie, she hates that.
I mean, I really felt when you asked me to do this, I was like, I am not the person she should be asking, you know? Like,
How are you not the person?
all right.
Now you know.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good hammer. When you think about your identity, how do you describe who you are?
Oh my God. So I was born in Korea. So I think originally that's just what my identity was. I spoke Korean. I didn't speak English. That's where I lived. That's when I saw my family, I saw Koreans. And then we moved here at like 4.5. And then our close family was very like Orthodox Jews or Reformed Orthodox Jews. And so then I switched identities, right? We became very ingrained in that culture. And so then I was Jewish and I was being raised Jewish and I was going to Jewish school, Hebrew school and Jewish school. And then we moved to like a really white conservative town in Thousand Oaks, like border of Thousand Oaks, Westlake. Mm-hmm. And very white, very conservative. And that's the first place I didn't fit in. But then when we moved to Thousand Oaks, it was like, and I think like I knew I didn't have a culture or an identity. Like it just kept shifting and I was confused, but I couldn't label that. And my parents would always say to me, you're not white, you're not Korean, you're not Jewish, or they'd say you're not mixed. They'd say you're 100% Korean and you're 100% Jewish. And that was so confusing for me.
How does that math work?
Right. And like, where do I fit in and how do I navigate that? And then I experienced a lot of racism in Thousand Oaks. Like my mom was called my nanny. Like I got the full, eye pulling ching chong chong, which was very strange for me because I looked in the mirror and I didn't see that.
It's also just so boring.
Yeah.
Like, don't you just wish there were some new slurs out there? I'm just like,
it still happens.
Like
it still happens.
The 40s.
Oh my God. Yes. So I don't know, like my identity has morphed and changed. And now I think I identify after like my journey of being so confused and feeling like I don't fit in, I definitely identify and have like a pride in being mixed, but I don't strongly, I identify more with my Korean side, which has always been a thing because I don't look Korean. Like I could pass for Jewish way more than I could pass for Korean, but I've always felt so much more connected to my Korean culture and my Korean identity. I grew up eating Korean food. I was closer, like I'd go home to Korea and feel like I was home.
I've done extensive amounts of research trying to figure out the answer to this, but some folks say that mixed or biracial people often identify strongly with the mother figure.
Okay.
So like for me, my dad is white, but my mom is black, but like I identify as black because my mom really wasn't going to allow it to be any other way.
Yeah. Like, same with my mom.
Wise, like embedded like under your skin. So I wonder like, is that how that shook out for you? Because of your mama?
Yes, very much so. And she like drilled home all the time. She was like, you are Korean. Like we speak Korean. She only spoke Korean to me. And anytime her and my dad fought, which happened a lot, we'd pack up our bags and go home to Korea. So it was like sold to me that way, you know, that I am Korean. So yeah. And then I wonder like how much of it comes from that like tribal, matriarchal, you know, like the man comes and goes and there's no real like stable foundation there. But the mother is like the
furniture and the
the rock.
Interesting.
Growing up in such a white dominated society, like there was maybe a few Koreans and a few blacks, and that was really it in my school. And then all my friends were blonde, and my mom and I had a lot of issues in high school. And so I think I started pushing that. Like she really pushed me to be friends with Asians and like, you know, pushed me to like do Taekwondo and pushed me to go to this like Korean school. And since she and I were butting heads, I think I really wrote that off. And then I just became white, you know, like I didn't have any Korean or Asian friends. And I was never accepted. There was like a group and I was never accepted into that group. And when I went to college, there was like a group, like I took Korean class to like hone my Korean skills. And there was like a very tight-knit group, but I've never been invited in, you know, it was like cute that I spoke Korean and it was weird that I spoke Korean. I was always exotic to men. You know, I think that's a big one. It's like I realized I wasn't a white girl to guys. I had, you know, that's when I was identified as Asian, is when I would date guys.
White guys.
White guys. I only dated white guys, which is like a whole nother thing I've looked at before. And at the same time, I was raised very culturally Jewish. Like we had Friday night Shabbat. Like I had a bat mitzvah. We went to shul. Like we did Passover. We did Yom Kippur. Like it's not like we skipped over that. And, you know, with Korean culture, like I did all the things. We had all the holidays. Like I said, we went back all the time. That's the food we ate. So I was very like brought up very strongly culturally and like traditionally, you know, the traditions were like very important. It didn't feel culturally fluid, I think. It felt like culturally confusing because it was like, no, this is very strong and happening, and this is very strong and happening. And there was like, for me, it was more of like, what is it, you know, or like, where am I, you know? And then I think probably as like a lot more racial stuff started floating to the top, I started having very strong feelings about it that I noticed my like white friends around me weren't having. And that's when I started like really being like, oh, there's stuff coming up for me that I didn't know was in there. And I'm feeling this like threat and also a power that's coming out as this is going on, you know? And that's when I think I first started being like, oh, I'm not like you. Yeah, I think that my ability to pass allowed some space for me to explore it more and see, you know, what I believe and not what is like. I didn't go to a Jewish private school like a lot of my family did, like where like where a narrative is like given to you, you know, and then that's what the whole community believes, and it becomes, you know, part of your belief system, right? And I didn't have that because I had enough separation from it. Honestly, at the beginning of all of the I mean, there's been Israel and Palestine issues forever, right? But like it really came to be a part of our current political issue, like what in the past, when was that? Since October 7th. And that, at the beginning of that, I've shifted a lot during that time. At the beginning of that, my Jewish identity became strong. And I was like, how could they do this to us? You know, I was reading a lot about what my family was saying about it on social media. I was reading a lot, just like how horrific is this that they came into our, you know, our music festival in our country and they've murdered us and they've done this horrific thing to us. And how could they do this? Like, where is this coming, right? The shock of it and the horrific story behind it without any of the historic context behind it, right? And just the blatant, this is our land, this is where we belong, and they're lucky that we're giving them, you know, like, look at what we've given them, right? Yes, it is horrible what's happened, but we have a right to be there. Right. This is our land, you know? Because I was raised with always like, they're wrong, we're right. I never really looked into it deeper and explored it deeper, which I think is such a danger of these very tight-knit cultural religious communities, is the like indoctrination of it, you know? And then as more started unfolding, right, and we were watching a genocide happen in front of our eyes, and I started posting about it, and a lot of Jewish friends and family were like, this is not a genocide. What we went through was a genocide. This is not a genocide. And that was just shocking to me, you know, that like, why can't we hold space for both? I wonder if, like, really relating to my Korean culture and not being so attached to my Jewish identity, like, allows this bigger space for me to be like, yeah, this is wrong, you know? What happened in Korea was horrific. And what happened in, you know, Israel is horrific, and Palestine and Sudan. Like, let's keep going, you know? And I think, what if being mixed allows for that a little bit more? And I think also not being just white, because I have a lot of white friends who are like, free Palestine, fuck Israel, right? And I think that's also dangerous. And I think that's where the like anti-Semitism, especially for diaspora Jews, I think that's where it's allowed to start to leak in lately, is those like white friends who have no idea also, or are not taking into consideration the fear that comes up for Jews in this situation, you know? And this like, I think there is a like protection, right? If we let this go, then what happens to us? Because it's happened so many times in history.
This whole, you know, the tragic mulatto trope that we've talked about, which is like, wow, 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 I'm so mixed race that nobody loves me. I can't find a home. Like, you know,
that is
people don't understand how devastating
that is the experience
can actually be.
Yeah.
That feeling of like, I still think that experience is the experience of a person of color writ large, no matter what. So I still couch it under like a racist experience. But I think that that loneliness can be really severe, especially when you have this cultural conundrum.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I was born in Korea, and there I just had my Korean family. And so I was the odd, person out, like in family to begin with. There was my dad, but he was like the weird white guy, but it was like, you are part of our bloodline. And yet, I had very light hair as a kid. And in Korea at that time, in the 80s, it was still exotic over there, like they would touch my dad and my hair as we walked by, like they would just pull our hair, or on the bus, they'd run their fingers through our hair because it was like light, thin hair. And they would chase my dad down the street and like make monkey noises because he had hair on his body. And so I was always an other there. And part of the reason they moved to the States was my whiteness, right? Let's move her to the place where she looks more like others, There was other reasons behind it, but that was one of the reasons. And so then we came here. And like I said, the main family that was here was very Jewish, right? Like religiously, culturally. And so that's where I went, and they sent me to the same schools that my cousins were going to. And that was the first place where I experienced bullying. Like my parents would come to pick me up, and I would be alone in a classroom with the teachers because the other kids wouldn't play with me, which was very confusing to me because I thought I looked like them. But they would see my mom, and I do not look like them, My mom would pack me kimchi and like seaweed and rice for lunch, and she'd speak Korean to me, and it quickly separated me. And I was like stinky kid. And so I would throw my lunch in the trash, and I begged my mom to pack me Lunchables and let me eat school lunch. And girls would come over. For some reason, I was very drawn to like the blonde popular girls in school, and I would invite them over for birthday parties, and they would be like, your house smells, your mom looks funny. Like it, it took off from there.
Are you comfortable talking about addiction?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. So you have to say, instead of me for the tape, that
I'm an addict.
So let's
Hi, my name is Ellie. I'm an alcoholic addict, sex addict, drug addict, alcoholic addict, all the things. I mean, freshman year is when I started to experiment with drugs and like really started drinking, partying.
Freshman year of high school?
Freshman year of high school. Yeah. So I was like 14. Yeah. And like I said, like men accepted me. And I like, that's when I first started hearing like, oh, you're Asian. Oh, you're like, right. You look Hawaiian. Like, what are you? And guys being attracted to that. So I really started using men to feel empowered, and that was the place where I felt safe and belonged because they embraced me. And then I just started getting, promiscuous and started partying a lot. And then around end of freshman year is when I started getting into heavy drugs. And when I got into heavy drugs, I got into like the rave scene, and it was a bunch of misfits, right? It was a bunch of kids who said, fuck the popular kids, screw fitting in, like we're doing our own thing, and this is our little tribe. And we do a lot of drugs, and we go to raves, but we also like just accept each other. And there was kids from all walks of life, from all economic homes, from all races. I mean, I think there was like just a couple of us, but it was just a bunch of misfits. And that was the first time I felt like I fit in. And so I really went with that, because that became more about who you are intrinsically versus who you are bloodline or how you look. But, unfortunately, that came with getting addicted to drugs, for me. It wasn't about fitting in. Sometimes it was like being into crack cocaine, but that's like, okay, that had nothing to do with being Korean or Jewish or white, you know? I am no longer raving. I am no longer smoking crack. I am now sober, going on 15 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But I think what happened was in sobriety, we do the steps, right? And I had a sponsor who, some sponsors like really just like go by the book and don't talk about feelings or like, you know, but my sponsor was one of those who really almost took a therapeutic stance on it, like looking at how did the past affect your belief system that you operated on that made you need to choose drugs and alcohol as a solution. And that's when I really started looking at how my not feeling a part of and not fitting in and being confused on my identity racially and culturally, how much that played into, you know, my unhappiness at a young age and then my drug use. That's like where I first became really aware of it. And so that's where I first kind of started being like, oh yeah, that was hard. Oh yeah, that's an experience that not everybody has. I am married to a white man. I have quarter Asian kids, if that is a thing that we're identifying, who are raised very Korean, like I was. You know, we eat a lot of Korean food. My mom speaks Korean to them. They FaceTime and Zoom with their Korean family way more than they do with their Jewish white family, right? Like, and yeah, I talk to them about how they are Korean and they're not white. You know, Izzy came home from school talking about racism, saying like, you know, I think it was Martin Luther King Day. And he said that, you know, race is bad and you can't judge people based on their skin color. And so, you know, I said, oh, how do you feel about that? And he said, yeah, I don't do that. And I said, well, do you know that you're not white? And he was shocked, you know. I said, you're Korean and you're Jewish. And he was like, no, Momo's Korean, you know. Or when I speak Korean, he says, why are you talking Momo's language? You know, not realizing, because I speak English in the home and I use some Konglish, we call it here and there, where I'll mix in Korean words with the English. And when I say goodnight to them, I say it in Korean. But I think at my mom's house, they're raised Korean much more. And then here, it's very white. And I think it is a lot of it, right? If I had married a Korean guy, that would have been totally different. And so I think being married to a white man makes the home much more white. Like I can see clearly the trauma that my mom takes on from generations of war, right? And I can see clearly the trauma that my dad takes on from generations of being marginalized and, you know, the racism against Jews and the horrific things that have happened. Like it's in our family conversations. It's in the way they react to the world. And so I think my husband is missing that. And I think in terms of how it affects our kids, I carry the weight of it because I think to him, it's like we talked about the exoticness, right? To him, it's this like, oh my God, what's the word I'm looking for? Not cute, but it's like it's like, oh, you're Korean and you're Jewish. And that's so crazy that you're not white. He's always like, it's so crazy that my kids are like Korean and Jewish. Like I never, right? It's this like fun little thing but for me, it's not fun, right? For me, it's like, I need them to know the culture behind it and the story behind it and the weight behind it.
Based on how you look and how you could move in this world, you don't have to do that.
Right.
You could opt into whiteness.
Right. Yeah.
So why don't you?
That's a really good question. Even though I see myself as white in the mirror, I don't feel white in my heart. And I think, or in my soul, or like in my like experience, like I don't feel white. And so I feel this need to claim that space, I feel like, and to let it be known that I am not white, you know? I think being very tied down to being other helped me to have these very strong views against racism. And I'm scared that if my kids are raised white, they won't have that. Like, I'm really scared of my kids being blind to that, and not even being blind, because like I wouldn't say Christians blind to it, but like really not being able to hold it as your own, you know? And having it be this like, oh, those are other people's like unfortunate experiences, you know? That's sad. But holding it as your own is a very different passion and need to fight racism. I'm very scared, and I think this is like we've talked about, like you're so punk rock and you're so like wanting to claim this like other outside space. I am scared of losing that. I think I'd be seen as like just a boring white girl, right? Like you're just a boring white girl with like tattoos, like trying to be cool, you know, versus like, no. Like I've had this really hard experience and I'm not white and I'm Korean and I'm Jewish and I went through horrific addiction issues and like I'm different, you know, and not different. Like I have earned my space. I'm really scared of people not knowing that. Like, I'm really scared of people not seeing and hearing me for who I am.
Maybe not seeing and hearing you.
Period.
Which is a very Asian problem.
Yes. Yeah.
Our third and final person we'll hear from today is Andrew Pops Gagno. We can call him Pops for this episode. And I met him in my inbox. He'd hired me to play music at his restaurant back home in Vermont, which is, for what it's worth, a very, very white state. Anyway, I was excited to play at Pops' restaurant because he didn't write or cook like the assumed Vermonter. His messages always ended with "bless up." The menu he'd planned was full of collard greens and red snapper and other dishes that felt deeply familiar to me. It's funny how little information we need before we start filling in the blanks and just making up this whole other person in our heads. By the time we'd scheduled a phone call, I wasn't just expecting to meet a chef. I was expecting to meet perhaps an elderly black man with some sort of ties to the Caribbean. Then he answered the phone, and I heard him speak, and I questioned everything.
I heard you say garage earlier with the
yes, garage, and double like doubling up words. So could you go put this in the garage? That was something that was in that area. Yeah, a lot of people said that. But the not too bad. How you doing? Did you shoot a good buck, bud?
What? Yeah. Shoot a good buck? Oh, for deer hunting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're in Duxbury, Washington County, that's how you're going to talk sometimes.
Do you think that the way that you speak has shaped how people have understood you racially, passing or not passing?
Oh, 100%, 100% every day. Like in the restaurant business, you get taken seriously, when you talk like this, and if you're really on point and, you're being very professional and you're sounding, like you need to in those moments, that works. And that's what being raised in the home that I was raised in, that's what it did for me. With a whole bunch of trials and tribulations and some trauma, I decided I needed to travel and take off. And going down south, like North Carolina, South Carolina, I was at a barbecue in South Carolina for, 6-8 months. And that was the best time of my life to learn that culture. And that was where I got the most amount of questions about, why do you talk like that? Where are you from? How were you raised? At this one barbecue, for instance, it was like a mom and pop style barbecue family thing, and that was like a pivotal point in my life, because I learned where mac and cheese came from, like a true story. I get to taste it. I learned what collards were. I learned, like how you make, beans, like how you pick peas, how you do all these things. And that was where I still passed, but you had to you had to show. You had to work a little bit harder, because they were curious also.
So what do you mean you passed as what, Black?
Yeah, you could pass as Black with like work ethic, right? With like love of, I was starting to figure out who God was in my life. So like love of God, like just being family and loving people, that was where that brings everything together. So that also helped me pass, there was no judgment in my eyes. So they accepted me because I was 100% accepting of them.
So you've had the experience of passing in both white culture and Black culture.
Yes.
As Black and as white.
Yes. You're looking for an identity when you become adopted by a white family in Duxbury, Vermont, and you are Black. Before like that 9th grade, top 15, right? When everything gets interesting for a young man, I would say before that, whenever I saw a person of color, they were always like, hey, how are you? It was always like, hello. If it was in a store and there was time, they would introduce themselves to me. And that changed over time, but when I started to notice it was when like ladies got interested in me in high school, when it was like, oh, he's different, and like, let's talk a little bit more to this guy and stuff like that. Then I started noticing something with some of like the people who were, considered like the tough, like redneck guys. And that was where racism came out. The first time somebody throws the N-word at you and it's aggressive, and you're not prepared for that, I got quiet at first, and like shed some tears. I was sensitive.
When somebody throws the N-word at you for the first time, it's just so disarming. It's like you think you'd be prepared for a moment like that in your life, and you just never are. Just knocks you completely off of your senses, right? And brings you to almost instant tears. And my daughter is 6, and I'm just like dreading her first time. I'm just dreading it for her.
In the 80s and 90s, we weren't biracial. I fair skinned, both parents, African American, both sides, white percentage, but it was like, is he mulatto? That was the comment in the 80s and 90s, So there was always like, oh, we adopted him, and then you hear that story. The story was told over and over again. But I passed so well, because couldn't really be pushed around too much, So I passed off very well until I didn't. When I left high school, I left with my high school sweetheart and moved to New Hampshire, and I had some money and I was like, hey, I'm going to start selling some cannabis and trying to do this thing that I think I'm supposed to do. It was really like a switch for me because we went from Duxbury, Vermont to like outside of a city in New Hampshire. Okay. And there was no Black people in the area, in that immediate area. But what there was this direct connection to like Manchester and Nashua and Concord. So you go to the Manchester Mall at 18, just graduating high school, and you're going to see some Black people. Mm. And then you see how they dress and how they act. And then you're like, wait a second, I know nothing about this. So then you start watching BET and you start paying attention to that culture way more. And you're like, I'm supposed to be this person that I never was. For instance, do you remember Finger Hut? Like you could order clothes off Finger Hut and CDs. It was a magazine, and you could get like FUBU stuff, and you could get these things that like I wasn't used to. So what I would do is I would order up on Finger Hut and get all this stuff and then never pay for it, so that I could have those clothes. So that when I did go to the mall or I did go to another state or another place, I could fit in. You know, and then if I went back to Vermont to visit my adopted family, I could not wear those clothes and they would have no clue. Mm. So for me, it was like, that was where I started realizing that because of the fact that I talked the way I did, but I was a quick learner, that I could actually change my web and I could fit in.
With other Black people.
Yeah.
And you thought that they would want a version of you that was more BET Black than
true story
yourself Black, because you are
than
Black.
Myself, right? Because what I didn't think is that I didn't think they wanted the guy from Duxbury, you know, that could like feed them and shoot a whole bunch of deer for them and maybe fix some minor things on their car, right? I didn't think they wanted that.
Yeah,
you know, because Future shows you that you didn't want that.
Why not?
Because it was being adopted is tricky, because you're like, who am I? Because when we take a family picture, you're like, you're not that, and you are Black. What you're raised at and what you can become are two totally different things, because you're versatile now. You know, the people that are around you the most, they always know when you start switching up. You know, they can tell. And as soon as, you know, my adopted family started to question, was when I started to actually run away more and go deeper away from it.
What was making them start to question you?
Because like the life that I was living in New Hampshire would bleed into the life that they would see when I would come back and visit. You know, like I didn't really wear a gold chain, and then I had a gold chain. And, you know, like I didn't always have baggy stuff and Timberlands, you know, and then they would see that, you know, and I think for me, there was shame built in that for me. So I had to run away. And, you know, sometimes when you run from shame, you get deeper into that thing that you're running from. And it became not easy, but it was like, this isn't that hard, you know, like. And where it really changed was somebody said, we can go to Virginia and pick up some cannabis really cheap. And I said, let's go. And then because, you know, there's this whole dynamic that not a lot of people talk about. And that's, if you happen to be, there's no other way to say it, but if you're in like a county in New Hampshire and you happen to be the token Black guy, like you get a lot of respect if you can make money and you can get things, right? You know, so for me, there was always this thing about like being like admired, right? You didn't always, and you know, I think some of us just have this thing inside us where like they want to be famous, but they just get found out, you know? And I think before I went through a whole bunch of stuff, that was my idea. It was just like, how big can I get? Who can, you know, like that was where it was.
How'd that go?
Well, it turned into, I did it one time, made some money, and that was where the hustling part came in. Was because I spent this much on it and I realized I could make this much. And I was like, wait a second, that math is really good for me right now. And I didn't have to go to work. So that was the thing. It was like, that was where it started. The whole story is that my girlfriend at the time, I married her, okay, and her two brothers, they had already been hustling. And this is all like super public knowledge, and it's 20 years ago. But her stepfather was the chief of police in the town that we lived in. Whoa. And he had suspected that her brothers were selling. Then he suspected that I was, because I came in, right? And they did a year-long investigation in the whole area. And they found one person to wear a wire. This guy shows up and he's like, it was my birthday and I was just turning 21. And he shows up and he's like, hey, can I get a bag of weed? And I was like, you're my boy. Don't worry about it. Don't give me any money. And I was like, come back later. He comes back and he's got the money in his hand. And I didn't want the money. It was my birthday. I wanted to make it like it was a gift to him. And he had a wire on. And he threw the money down on the bed where the bag of weed was. And he said, here you go. Thank you. And he grabs the weed and walks out the door. And then 3 days later, I had like a side hustle working at a gas station. Mm-hmm. And 3 days later, I had came home from work and I was making my daughter, who was just like 1 at the time, I was making her some SpaghettiOs on the stove. It was like 4 o'clock. And all of a sudden, 2 white vans and a Explorer and guys in masks, and they kicked the door open, put the gun to my head, but at that point, I was like, you've been trying to live this life and this is what you do. Now you go to jail. Like, that's what happens.
So it's so interesting because you, by all intents and purposes, because of your ability to pass and because of your class status from your adopted family, you had every opportunity to kind of maintain a white life in a lot of ways without being, part of the statistics and stereotypes of being an incarcerated Black man for marijuana, tale as old as time. But you ended up kind of being a stereotype in a sense.
Yes. And it wasn't, it's like I lived this whole life that I'm not a quitter and, go big or go home. So if I was going to live the stereotype, I was going to live it. So, it started out like, I'm going to hustle, and that was where it started. But when I got married and we had our first 3 kids, just out on bail and trying to like live this life, 2 lives. And the kids were being born. Moses and my son had came, and I was still in and out at that point, make parole, come in and out. And then she passed away. That was where there was a time. It was like in my mind, it was like, I have this many months to get myself together and be a dad to these 3 beautiful kids, or I'm not going to. And it just hit me. I was just like laying there and I was like, I'm alone. I have nobody. Like, what am I going to do now? And can I take care of these kids? And, that was where I just went off the deep end. I took off. My kids went to my family's house, to my parents' house, and I took off and like spent some money and kind of just was figuring out if I was even going to make it, honestly. And then got picked up and went into a rehab. But it was the rehab where everything changed for some reason. It was where I actually felt like I was this stereotype now. Like, you had kids, your wife is dead, you can't take care of your kids. You're in rehab because you peed dirty for drugs that you don't even like. So it was that was where the shame became toxic. 5-6 years ago, I was like, this stereotype stuff is not working. You're an amazing chef who can pass, right? Who can do this really amazing things every day in a kitchen. And, you have the ability to be a great dad, and you have the ability to be a great husband, and, maybe get your family back.
Yeah. And all of your kids, are they in your care now?
No, some things need to have some time, and it's time to reach out. And I've been trying, like in these, like these ways. And it'll get there, I also believe that it's kind of, there's the path is lit up before me. And there's a couple things that you got to do first. So, first off, to become adopted, you have to be given away, right? You could be taken away or you could be given away, right? Either way, right? So if you sit back and you're like, okay, I was taken away or I was given away, you're not with your DNA, right? So that's immediately, as a 2-month-old, you're suffering loss that you don't even know, okay? So then when you realize, like the adoption was fine when I was 5. So then when you realize, wait a second, I have a family, you understand for the first time before other 5-year-olds that you were chosen by somebody. And that's the part where it made my shame so toxic, was because somebody says, do you love your parents? Okay, so like, I'd be like, yeah, I love my parents. Of course, they raised me. They're my parents. But when you're adopted and somebody says, do you love your parents? You're like, wait a second. Do you understand they actually took me in and they chose me? So if I love them, like that might be a little bit more stronger than the next guy who was born into the family, because they didn't have to accept me. Right? So that right there, you long for something that you don't even know what it is. But what you have is so amazing that you feel bad for longing for something that you don't even know what it is, because you have what other people don't, right? So then when you're trying to figure out who you are and you meet your birth mom for the first time, and she's like talking in the way and cooking fried chicken and beans and rice and double dipping the fried chicken, and you're like, what is this? Like, I have no clue what this flavor is. I have no clue what this life is. It instantly turns into this wrestling match inside. I realized that there's stuff that is inside us that makes us Black, that you can't deny it. Like, you could be raised for 18 years in a White House, but, like, you are Black there, like what we taste when we eat food, like, there's a certain way to love people that's a little bit different. How you can handle stress and anxiety, right? And even pain, because you're not very far removed from a whole bunch of that, So that's what I realized, was that there is this idea of being raised Black or being raised white or whatever it is. And then there's actually what the truth is that DNA doesn't lie. I do what every other human does, okay, is you tell yourself a story about something that happened. And even though we all say that we're honest and we might not ever lie, we're really good at lying to ourselves about things that happen. So for me, I had to forgive the story I told myself, even with the facts that were in there, about other people. And when I did that and I forgave them, then I started to really figure out how to love. And that's where I'm at now. And then people say, who are you? They're going to see somebody that just loves people. Like, that's the only way to explain it. I tried so hard, but that's the only way, is that if somebody says, if you said in one word who you are, it would be love. Because that's what got me to say, like, don't be that stereotype, because it's really easy to be that stereotype, and then love comes in and you're like, wait a second, like, when I be me, more people love me.
Bruce, Ellie, and Pops, thank you so much for sharing your stories with us. This episode was not for the faint of heart, and it asked so much of you regarding your own conclusions about your identity. Conclusions most people don't come to in a lifetime. So thank you for the research project, the grand search within. I hope you gained something from simply saying some of this stuff out loud. I know I gained so much from hearing you. In fact, making this episode has me thinking a lot about my own identity and the responsibility that comes with it. I think I can resonate with a little bit of everyone's story here. Bruce left me wondering about passing as not just something other people fail to see. It's also about what you lose when the world never asks who you are. Or what you are. Hopefully we evolve that question soon. But then I thought about my friend Ellie, because Ellie has the opposite problem. The world asks her who she is all the time. And her answer, who I am, lives in my heart. I mean, the confidence. Please bottle that, sis, and pass it on. Also, listening to Pops, I realized something. Passing isn't always something the world does to you. Sometimes it's something you start doing yourself. Sometimes you begin performing the version of yourself you think everybody else wants. And maybe that's the danger in all of this. We spend so much time asking whether people can pass that we forget to ask what they're passing away from. How far can you get away from self before it's too far? If you have something to add to the story, or you just want to tell yours, hit us up on Substack at Homegoings with Myra Flynn, or on Instagram, same title. I'd love to hear from you. This episode was reported, mixed, and hosted by me, Myra Flynn, and the rest of the work was handled by a bunch of badasses on our team. James Stewart, our producer, Elodie Reed, our editor and graphic designer, and Joe Mullins, our visual director. You heard a lot of sound today, so let's give credit where credit is due. I composed our theme music with production help from Tim Sonnefeld. All other music is by Blue Dot Sessions, with some sweet, sweet sound design from James Stewart. That deserves a shout out, like the bar sounds, the kids' playground sounds, and the restaurant sounds you heard at the intro of each person we spoke with. Yeah, that's all James. If you're thinking right now, this is the podcast I need in my life, then great, we got you. You can follow along with our monthly episodes here by subscribing to the feed. You can also find us on Substack, Instagram, and YouTube at Homegoings with Myra Flynn. Homegoings was originally produced by Vermont Public and is now an independent podcast. Thanks for going there with us today.